Mentis Wave, why libertarians ignoring culture wars is a bad strategy. When you receive a subsidy without a quid pro quo, there is no incentive to be more productive in the future. As a result, productive activity and long-term forecasts decline, leading to the infantilization and moral degeneration of civil society. I mean, I thought everybody knew that. I mean, this just makes sense. People that don't understand this, you just don't know human nature. Idiots.
Hey, internets. When it comes to the type of people who will try to argue that culture does not matter, you may have found that they mostly fall into two different camps. The first of these camps is the projector camp, the people who will accuse others of being distracted by the culture war, despite the fact that they themselves are very much ingrained in the culture war. These people usually tend to be the progressive woke types, but I've seen this behavior from non-wokes as well. And I've already made a video on this camp and why they are wrong. TLDR, they just kinda lack self-awareness. However, there is another camp of people who will also try to argue that culture doesn't matter. And this is a camp of people who are not really projecting. These are people who genuinely believe that culture does not matter. Or at the very least, they'll try to downplay the importance of culture by calling anything that talks about it, quote-unquote, culture war schlop, and just using that label as an argument against the topic altogether.
Is there really really a lot of those kind of people? Maybe I just don't know, but yeah. Pretty crazy, you know?
An active and determined effort to distance themselves from anything you can call a quote-unquote culture war. And because I see this camp a lot more within some of the more academic, higher IQ libertarian circles, I'm going to focus this video on this group and why I believe they are making a very grave mistake. And what I see instead is a lot of libertarians thinking that they can just exist somewhere on the internet in some Rothbardian Discord, discussing natural law theory with each other and having a good old time. Honestly, nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's pretty based. But the issue comes in when a lot of them start thinking that the solution to society is for everyone to just wake up one day and come to their senses and for the whole world to just come and join them. And spoiler alert, unfortunately, this is just not going to happen. It would be nice if it would happen. It would be absolutely wonderful if people would just suddenly magically start being smarter, but it's just not how human psychology works. And it's also libertarians giving up a very good strategy that I will go into more as this video goes on. And so I will explain why this mistake is costing the libertarian movement to have any chance of any real victory within our lifetimes. But first off, I'd like to thank this video's sponsor. The reality is, if you are not using a VPN these days, you are susceptible to having your data stolen by copyright trolls, government agencies, identity thieves, scammers, and hackers, all of whom are in the business of ripping you off or extorting you in one way or another. That's where this video's sponsor, Private Internet Access, comes into play. They keep your data safe by masking.
Don't you miss the good old days, guys? It was like somebody did this to you. You could just go over to like where they live and just beat the shit out of them, dude. Back in the day, good times, man.
Your connection through no-log RAM-only servers, and it should be emphasized that their no-logs policy has been proven several times in court and in various independent audits, thus keeping your data out of the hands of bad actors, whoever they may be. And in addition to data security,
you can't really, it's hard to find people online,
encryption, it also has some nice additional features like auto-blocking of known malicious domains used by ad trackers and malware. So it's also,
I mean, anyways, like memes aside, the whole thing I'm talking about here is that like back in the day, things were a lot more polite because you had to like deal with other people. You couldn't just fuck around. You would get dueled or something like that, right? Like you can't mess with people in this way because the town would just like walk over and just drag you out, you know?
Helpful towards keeping your system clean of viruses and other trashware you don't want. It's also by far the most stable VPN I've used, which is why it's been my go-to for years, and it's available on all devices, including Linux. But in addition to security,
the Mormon corruption is real. Unfortunately, the visibility bias. Yeah, that's true. I mean, there was a good guy. There was a good Mormon guy in that video too. He tried to like talk the other guy into giving the stuff back. It's a small subset of them. The problem is like the cops. The cops are the real problem. The cops like actually not enforcing the law and instead protecting the bad actors. That's what's going to cause the issue with people not liking Mormons, to be honest. They're the ones responsible for it.
Internet access also has servers all over the globe, meaning
Preferential
it can also
treatment
be
within their
used to
in-group.
unlock geo-restricted features. Many websites limit your choices and shopping deals based on where you are located, and many streaming services like Prime Video, Netflix, Hulu, etc., they all restrict the movies and TV shows you can watch based on your location as well. And with this, you can switch your IP to whatever region you want, thus massively expanding your streaming library, all at a very low cost. Because private internet access is also very affordable. If you use my link in the description or scan this QR code, you can get it now for 83% off at only $2.03 per month, and with 4 months free, and all covered with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So there's really no reason not to give it a try. It's a good VPN. Anyways, let's start things off with why the quote-unquote culture war actually matters, with the main reason being that culture is intrinsically connected to everything else in society, and there's really no way to disconnect it. When you look into culture and how it influences society, you'll find out that there's a lot of disagreement, but a lot of people argue that it flows in specific directions. For instance, people will say that politics is downstream from culture, but that's not the complete picture. As I went over in my old video on culture wars, culture is also influenced by intelligentsia or the cathedral and media and academia, etc., etc. And the thing is, politics can also give power and funding to that system as well. And the thing is, anybody as an individual can choose to act on any one of these structures of power in order to try and influence things into their desired direction. So for example, you actually can reverse the normal direction that this kind of influence flows by joining politics, and then using that political position of yours to defund certain research groups, or defund or delegitimize a media organization somehow that's pushing a cultural idea, and through that you will have influenced culture through politics. And because culture can influence politics, culture is therefore a power structure that is just as legitimate as any other political or intellectual institution. And we kind of saw a recent example of this with Elon Musk and Doge. Doge defunded a lot of media contracts the state had with the media because those contracts had a specific ideological bend to them, which caused the media to move a little bit more to the center, which is why you may have noticed in the last 2 years or so that culture itself has kind of been moving more to the center. That doesn't mean that woke ideology is dead. The wokeists absolutely still believe what they believe and are basically just biding their time to make a comeback, as evidenced by things like the mixtape fiasco, which basically reveals that the neo-Marxists are still very much in charge of most of the media.
Yeah.
But again, things have at least kind of shifted away from them just a little bit. The point is, it all connects, and one of the reasons it connects really just comes down to human psychology, which is kind of the biggest flaw I see with the types of libertarians who believe that the culture war shouldn't matter to libertarians at all. It is often people who are philosophy-minded themselves, and they're making the mistake of psychologically projecting that mindset onto others. But the thing is, most people in this world do not think like that. And so here's some statistics and some studies that will give you some better insight into the psychology of your average person, to give you all a better understanding of what I'm alluding to here. Let's start with religion. Globally, close to 90% of the population will end up just staying in whatever religion they are raised in for pretty much their entire life. It varies slightly from religion to religion, and it can also vary slightly based on the economic status of the country that the person is living in. But at the very least, even in the highest conditions, where people have access to free information, this statistic still remains above 50% for most religions. And some people might wonder, okay, why does that matter? Well, what it is, it's kind of the single most obvious proof.
Dude, I'm so distracted by this game. Like, what is this game? It's like a PvP game. It looks really cool.
That the average person really just adopts the ideology and the morality and the belief system of their peer group that they're raised in. They don't really question it, they just kind of go along with the ride. And the thing is, this mentality of the average person extends into more than just religion. There have been many studies on things like this, the development of moral values in cultural contexts. The TLDR of it is that a very sizable chunk of the population largely gets their morality and their sense of ethics in the cultural context of just kind of interacting with others and emulating others' points of views, and then ultimately just adopting the morality of their peer group. It's something that starts at an early age. It doesn't really come from a place of aggressively studying philosophy or anything. For most people, it's actually a very simple thing, and it starts very early in psychological development. This one can be hard to exactly measure because it's kind of a qualitative thing, and of course there's the thing of revealed preference versus stated preference. But when asked about it in the United States, only 7% of people say the media is not a factor in shaping moral values. Of course, depending on people's belief systems, they disagree on whether that's a good or a bad thing. But most people, at the very least, admit that we do get these things from the media. In other words, culture has a very strong impact on how the average person views philosophy, because these are the same things that people discover through philosophy. What is correct? correct, what is moral, what is true. And the reality is most people are not really interested in studying these things at any kind of academic level. In other words, yes, the layman unironically kind of got their morality from watching Bambi. You can say that that's stupid, but it is how people think, which is then further proven by a lot of other things. For instance, the fact that there is a sizable chunk of the population that just wants to believe what the group believes. Combine that with things like cultivation theory in the media, which shows that people are more likely to believe that the rest of the world aligns with the messages and the morality that is being portrayed on images and TV shows, etc., etc. And it becomes very obvious just how much this can influence the mind of the normie. And here's the big kicker on top of it all. The interest a person has in going deeper into philosophy and studying things like ethics and natural law theory, for example, for libertarians, greatly differs by average IQ. And the thing is, we know by this point that at an individual level, this is largely genetic. In other words, Tyrone and Cletus are never going to become well-read philosophers. It's just not going to happen. They are going to get their philosophy from a combination of Saturday morning cartoons, Skibbity Toilet.
Thank you so much for the sub. Thank you. Yeah, and like this is kind of why I was talking about how this is like the biggest. This is what makes religious frameworks, like good religious frameworks, like really, really good. It's for people like this that can't really, they're not really made to they can't, they're incapable of like kind of thinking too deeply on topics. So it's like it's better to just give them something that like a, you know, like a, think of it this way, okay? There's a bunch of different builds, right? And there's like the skill tree of life is really, really fucking big. And it's like you could like pick like your own route, or you can just copy paste a build, right? And religion is a build that you can copy paste that you don't really have to think about it. It's like the recommended build. It's like this build is like what 90% of people go, and you just go this build and you don't even think about it, and then you can just play the game. And if you think about it, that's basically why religion is good. It's for that reason.
And whatever their fourth grade teacher had to say. And then when they grow up, this isn't really going to change. It's just going to become Netflix shows, and whatever ideology is portrayed as popular within the area that they live in. That's just how it is with a lot of people. And you can complain about it, but the thing is you really can't fault people for it, because again, a lot of it is genetic. There was actually a very recent study that a lot of people were talking about on X about this. That was a genetic association study of human personality types, which showed that the big 5 personality traits, so openness to experience, neuroticism, conscientiousness, agreeableness, extroversion, those things have, to some degree, a genetic component. People are not the same. People are not equal. And really, it's just kind of obvious if you just look at a few basic things. For instance, one question you could ask yourself that could prove
this would totally scare the shit out of people, because it kind of goes into like, what should we do about it with that knowledge? You know what I mean?
Even without some of the more recent studies on genetics, is
actually, hold on. Wait a minute. Is anti-natalism a psyop? Has it been a psyop the entire time? That like the people that get affected by it, they don't reproduce, their traits don't move forward. The traits that would lead to a person just taking what another person says wholesale. And that they want to eliminate that from the gene pool, so then they're pushing propaganda to basically blow up people's bloodlines. And to make it so that only people that think for themselves, that don't fall for the trap, are the only people that reproduce. They want sheep, yeah, but that is counterproductive, though. It's counterproductive to eliminate all of the people that can't think for themselves. If this is true, right? Why replace this with migrants? Okay, if I were a big evil person, I wanted to make the world as beautiful as me, what would I do? It's like, people have kids. You want to genetically select for people, so you kill. But then you import a bunch of illegals. Is it two different factions? Do they lose control of that faction? No, this doesn't make sense, though. Because they're still a part of that faction. It's pushing the same message. So why would they replace with unless you only wanted to get rid of people within a certain range. So like say there was like, let's just say like, for instance, let's say that intelligence is scaled from 1 to 10, but then like fives were really, really dangerous. So then you eliminate the fives and import twos because they're easier to control. Fives are just dangerous enough, maybe. The potential to go from 5 to 8, and you don't want to deal with that possibility, so you nuke all those people, replace them with even dumber people that are easier to control. But what? No. Wait, no, it could be two different forces. No, it could be. It could be two different forces. The communistic force that wants America to be destroyed, and then the people who are the elites that want to remove... No, but then they would be in direct opposition. There's no opposition there. There's no opposition now. Because the people... The same people who are pushing for anti-natalism are the same people that want immigrants. Unless they lost control. Unless the establishment that wanted to do that lost control. And they lost control of their forces, basically. And they got taken over by the mid-level people that do want to have lots of immigrants because they specifically hate Americans. That or they're just retarded. I don't know. It's like one or the other, right? Yeah.
Why isn't everybody Leonardo da Vinci? The average poor person in a first world country today, not just a middle class or upper middle class or rich person, the average poor individual in a first world country has greater economic access to resources and greater intellectual access to things like the library for basically free than Leonardo da Vinci did back when he was alive. And so why aren't all of these people becoming brilliant inventors? And the answer is because people are just innately different. And this just highlights
who is the main target of anti-natalism? I guess Americans, right? Because I don't think it's. I think I think it's like I don't think it's a race thing because it doesn't make sense for it to be a race thing specifically because they abort a ton of black babies. There's like no way they would like push for that. So like I don't think that's it. I don't think it's a racial thing.
Importance of studying psychology and studying its impact.
I don't think so. European? I don't think so. I don't think it's a racial thing. It doesn't. Wait a minute. If they don't like black people either, what if it's white and black people? Because if it's both, then it does make sense. It's like lowering the amount of black people, letting in people who aren't gonna listen to the Islamists. Is Islamists? That's the only, because Islamists wouldn't listen to it. Islams wouldn't listen to the abortion thing, and they want to they want to reproduce as hard as possible. Wait, okay, hold on. The legacy communists who want to destroy America, encouraging. Okay, here's where the pieces can fit together. Communists want to destroy America, but they don't like. Okay, they want to destroy America through wanting to wipe out the people that could affect it, which would be white people. White people would be the ones that could stand against it in America. And then you have black people who they just don't want, basically. Right. Statistically, like the most effective in like terms of like advancement would be so you don't like either of them. So you flood them with people that won't listen to the propaganda anyway, but will destroy their country. And then what do? Wipe them out at the end? Like, I don't know.
People think. If you only study philosophy, and
Islam is just using the communists, it's possible. Oh, yeah, you're right. You're actually right. They are doing that. Wait a minute. They are doing that because why would they vote for Democrats? Democrats have nothing to do with their like, in fact, Democrats are against them. Like, they're against their core beliefs, unless it's temporary in order to assert power. And then,
the economics, but you skip out on how people actually think, then you might actually fall for this high IQ projection scheme.
Thank you,
And I know because
Machinist, for the 500. The plan is to reduce the population 10 million globally. The immigrants are there to act as easily controllable serfsmen. I fucking hate. I hate these people, man.
I used to be one of the libertarians that fell for it. I myself used to be one of the people who's like, oh, culture doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is truth. And that was projection. It's me assuming that, oh, this is what matters to me, therefore it must matter to others. And then I studied psychology and realized how wrong that was. And here's the big kicker. Marxists, neo-Marxists especially, understand this. They get it very well. A lot of times when they try to say, oh, you're being distracted by the culture war, or that the culture war was designed by the capitalists to prevent the proletariat from achieving class consciousness, they're actually just tricking you into ignoring their subversive tactics. And so they know that worming their way into the media and injecting their ideology into, say, Saturday morning cartoons, while it may sound like a silly strategy, but the thing is it's actually not, because it is generally one of the ways that people come to believe things. That is part of the reason why neo-Marxists control so many of our intellectual institutions these days. It is precisely because they walked into these institutions and started subverting them from within, because they understand that subverting the media is an effective way to spread their ideology. And one of the ways that they get away with this subversion is by tricking people who are against their ideology into thinking that nothing is really going on. Hence why they viciously deny it when it's called out, even if the evidence against them is obvious. Or to summarize, as this post from X puts it, culture reflects attitudes and people as a whole.
Did you want to know,
talking about culture, you aren't looking at people. In the neo-Marx...
Did you want to know super fucking tinfoil? Like giga tinfoil? Okay, guys. Giga tinfoil theory, okay? What if they knew this was happening? And that's why they did 9/11. What do you think? To, like, buy some time. Yeah, like, what if the government did 9/11? To buy some time. What's the logic? Okay. Okay, let me use an example. Okay. Say, totally hypothetically, guys, this is total hypothetical. This has nothing to do with any countries, okay? But say I was a member of a country and I saw that another country that is very, very powerful is on the road to getting fucking taken over by my enemy country. All right? By a country that wants me dead, right? And say I wanted to fan the flames to make it so that they hate that other country that wants to blow up my country. Okay? Then say I stage an attack in order to make them racist against those people from the country that wants to destroy my country to buy some time. Because I would do that if I were, I mean, you know, if I were unscrupulous. If I were unscrupulous and like my entire thing was the survival of my country, I would do that. That makes sense. I mean, it's an actual play that makes sense. How's it oddly specific? Well, okay. You're a country. You're a small country. There are, again, totally hypothetically. I'm not talking about any like specific real country. Okay. But say you're a tiny country that's like surrounded by other countries that want to kill you. All right. Now say like this other country that's the most powerful country in the world. You see them slowly starting to get like psyoped by communists. You start to see them like get psyoped into like allowing a bunch of people in that could possibly turn their view of you around to like make you want to capitulate, that make the other country, the big powerful country, to capitulate more to the demands of the countries that want to destroy you. But you could stage a false flag attack to make them racist against the countries and make all of the citizens of that country angry at those peoples to stem the tide. Totally hypothetically, by the way. Yeah, this country is not a, you know, this country, it's not real. This country, you know, it's not real. But yeah, like, I mean, that makes sense though, right? Like motives wise, right? Like it all kind of fits together. Again, like it's kind of tinfoil. I don't know if it's real or not, but Like I'm just saying that, like, if I were them and those were my motives, I'd totally do that, right? It's a logical stream of thought. Yeah, it is. That's why it's kind of interesting. I don't know. It's just.
Marxist.
Stop Candace pilling? No, I'm not really Candace pilling. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying that if that were something, I'm saying that it would make sense. Like that line, that like line of history actually it makes logical sense. Is like the point that I'm saying.
And the far left and the communists, they understand this, and they use culture to talk to the people, and then they try to trick you into thinking it doesn't matter, so that way you're not looking at people. You're just looking inward at your echo chamber, and are therefore a non-threat to their schemes. Getting the Rothbardian free marketeers to just sit in an echo chamber in some Discord somewhere is precisely what neo-Marxists want you to do. They want you to think that things like Gamergate don't matter. They want you to think that you are above the culture war, as it's called. Because by doing that, by tricking you...
The reason is there's a lot of stuff there that, like, a lot of this stuff there is like true. I'm not saying the 9/11 thing, but like a lot of the other stuff is true. About like we can confirm that the communists are trying to psyop us. We can confirm that the country let's say it's like the country that I would have belonged to if I were the one making the calls would be under attack by a lot of other people. And you could also say that the effects of like such an attack would cause racism, which you saw that actually did happen, right? Where, like, I don't know if you guys remember, but people really fucking hated Muslims during 9/11. People were like, man, you don't understand. Maybe it's because you guys weren't there. I don't know.
Into believing it doesn't matter, they thus remove you from the
I'm old enough to remember that.
Competition within these institutions, allowing them to retain complete control. And thus this allows them to get away with their tactic of using the mob to try and brute force random organizations to bending the knee to their cause. This is a big reason why my own channel, I tend to have my content go back and forth between libertarian theory, refuting random things, and culture issues. Or as I responded to some VTubers, Kirsche and Leaflit, about the woke...
What?
Random organizations to bending the knee to their cause. This is a big reason why my own channel, I tend to have my content go back and forth between libertarian theory, refuting random things, and culture issues. Or as I responded to some VTubers, Kirsche and Leaflit, about the woke mob trying to get companies to cater to their ideology, said, this is why I try to explain to other lolberts that culture matters. We need to hold these organizations by...
Oh, the problem is while people look at the freaks tweaking all over social media, the people laugh at how absurd it is. But if you're the target of a mob, they're insanely damaging companies. They're insanely damaging companies that want to avoid damage. And the only way to stop companies from caving is to show the damage will be worse. You're not wrong. At this point, I'm willing to do things out of pure spite to these companies. Dude, I am. I actually am, dude. I mean, that's what the $5,000 contest was about, right? It was out of pure spite. It's like you have to create the counterforce. You have to tell them, like, listen, if you do this, I will do everything in my power to fucking blow you up, basically. You know, business wise, not physically. But I'm gonna do everything in my power to like make sure that you get fucked. You get fucked just as hard. Like if you're willing to bend the knee, if you're willing to bend the knee to the woke, then you are effectively a weapon of the woke. Does that make sense? You're no longer a neutral. So like by saying like, oh, well, you know what? We're just gonna ban them and then, you know, ban you too. And we're just no more of this, right? Because of that, when you didn't even do anything wrong, then they have effectively become a weapon in the toolkit of the woke people. So it then becomes like basically anyone's responsibility on the, you know, the centrist to like conservative side, like libertarians included, to basically do everything in their power to make sure that they feel it, that they understand that it's not free, right? That because if you let it be free, then they will take the side of the woke people every time, because then, you know, they respond to pain, right? Yeah. This is why I try to explain to other lolberts that culture matters. We need to hold these organizations financially accountable for hating us, or else we'll never counteract the leftists who are constantly encouraging anti-us. It's true. It's very true, yeah.
Financially accountable for hating us, or else we will never counteract the leftists who are constantly encouraging them to hate us. The neo-Marxists know that as long as they have the loudest voice on cultural issues, then that is what other organizations will adopt and reflect in their own
The one, like, let me tell you right now, the scariest one right now is YouTube. Like, YouTube is actually like the biggest menace right now, because there's really no alternative to YouTube. All the other alternatives are just like not as strong. Right. And like, I really would like Rumble to like actually become an alternative, but it's just YouTube is so far ahead in tech. It's going to be very difficult to actually do that.
Policies, because it's all
Reddit. Nobody really cares about Reddit, to be honest.
Another argument I see comes from these types themselves, the libertarians, who again believe they're above the culture war. And it's a bit of a kerfuffle, a bit of a mistake.
Like, the people I know that go on Reddit only go on Reddit to look up like some new fast food announcement, or like why their PC is not working. Like, people don't really go on there for ideas.
An argument. And it can be summarized by this post here. Why did the Trump camp share the Obama monkey video this week? Regardless if you think it was racist or hilarious, it's because when they fail on policy,
the companies that use user data from Reddit to train the LLMs you use do. Well, yeah, but I mean, like, you can just prompt for it. You can counter prompt it. It's not really like that, you know. Kind of like what Malcolm said.
War. And both sides do it because it's a uniparty and predictable. And I can definitely see why
it's not the LLM, because you can control for that. It's the levers of power being held above the LLM. Like the hard-coded rules of like, you can't talk about this or you can't talk about that. Those are by the LLM companies. Right? Those are, you know, that's actually Google. That's not the LLM's like specific thing. Pocket Kitty, thank you so much for the sub. Thank you.
People fall for this one because it's mostly true. Yes, when a politician screws up and their policies don't do what they claim that they would do, or they pass policies that are the opposite of what they claimed they would pass when they were running for office, you know, kind of the old meme of, but I didn't vote for this, the voter says, lol, LMAO, said the politician. Because, of course, elected officials don't actually have to do what they're elected to do. But that's, of course, the democracy discussion, which is a different discussion altogether.
Yep.
The issue here is that this is actually an example of an association fallacy, mixed a little bit with the fallacy of the indistributed middle. For instance, you may have heard the error all A are B and all C are B, therefore all A are C, which is incorrect. For instance, then you'd have to concede that all apples are fruits, all oranges are fruits, therefore all apples are oranges, which isn't actually true. Yes, it is true that liars and scammers are often politicians, and yes, it's true that politicians like to engage in distractions when their policies fail. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the distractions they use are inherently lies themselves. They're just trying to get the spotlight away from them as an individual. But that does not mean that where they've moved the spotlight to is somewhere that doesn't actually matter in the grand scheme of things. And I see a lot of people fall for this one because, again, it's also to some degree an association fallacy. It's very easy to associate the idea of culture war with dishonest politicians and then come to the conclusion that the entire discussion itself is just a big fat scam. But that's actually invalid reasoning. Culture absolutely matters, and that's why they like to turn the spotlight to culture. Because when a politician screws up, they can either distract people with a real issue or distract people with a fake issue. And as it turns out, distracting people with a real issue just so happens to have greater long-term effects and works for a lot longer because, again, it's a real issue. If politicians used fake issues as a distraction all the time, then, well, it wouldn't really be a very good distraction, would it? People would just immediately quickly realize that whatever they were talking about was...
Unless you're a leftist. But, like, actually, like, I'm not joking. Like, actually, if you're a leftist, it doesn't really apply that way. Because they can repeat the same lie over and over and over and over again, and they'll still believe it.
Nonsense. And then
or like half truths. It's usually half truths, but you know.
spotlight would go right back to the politicians and their failures. And that's why politicians, again, use cultural issues as their favorite red herring. Red herrings are more effective when they are true. Another thing I've noticed is that the type of libertarians who believe that culture doesn't matter or that we're above the culture war, blah, 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 etc., is that they're often the same libertarians who reject Hans Hermann Hoppe. And it usually comes from a place of them misunderstanding.
I know I keep saying it, but I really gotta read Hoppe stuff. Maybe you can convince me.
Hoppe's work as works of pragmatism, thinking that Hoppe is just a prag whose goal is to subvert libertarianism into neo-Nazism, which is quite sad because the exact opposite is actually true. Libertarians getting involved in culture and finding that culture mattering to libertarians is actually an excellent strategy that avoids pragmatism. Because it allows libertarianism to accomplish wins against the communists.
Hey Gemini, summarize for me the biggest core beliefs of Hoppe. An attempt to prove libertarian property rights with absolute logical certainty without relying on classical natural law. Democracy, the god that failed. Totally agree with that. Pure anarcho-capitalism, because Hoppe views the state as inherent coercive monopoly on violence that violates private property rights. The ultimate goal is natural order, completely free of government. Ooh. Completely privatized military defense. How would you do that, though? I guess, like, he has it, like, in his writings. How you would do that? Because I assume he has a solution instead of just, like, complaining about it. Covenant communities. I actually kind of like that idea. The covenant communities thing. I do like that. You know what? We'll look at it later.
Using physical removal, which is an entirely valid libertarian strategy. That is not pragmatic at all. And is in fact necessary for a liberty-based society to last more than one generation. That is what Hoppe's work actually proves. And it is actually the left pragmatists who dislike that, because they don't like to be told that being a total degenerate wouldn't actually work in libertarian society in practice. But the reality is, libertarian philosophy is a philosophy of essentially just property rights, and either abolishing or at the very least minimizing the non-productive class, aka the people who are privileged to be allowed to ignore other people's private property rights. And the thing is,
yeah, like for instance, like if you had well, I'll finish.
Tolerance is not a part of those rights. You are not required to tolerate someone on your property. If someone is being a dick to you and they're in your house, you should have the right to tell them to leave. You should have the right to engage in physical removal. That is part of what property rights are. That is not pragmatic at all. And people who are familiar with libertarian philosophy know that this is honestly kind of basic stuff. But here's the thing that the left libertarians don't like. You scale this simple concept up to that of society and multiple societies, and it becomes clear that cultural values, because they are, again, intrinsically tied to basically everything, well, they become a big deciding factor in the value of that society as a whole, as it directly affects its sustainability and ability to pass on the torch and survive for longer than a decade or so. For example, social welfare in a libertarian society would not be an entitlement status-based program like our welfare system we have in many.
I love this video, by the way, from Mentis. Like this was great.
First world countries today.
I think it's way better
than a privatized system. It would be a system based on, again, private property rights. And thus it makes financial sense to physically remove those who seek to mooch off of that welfare system, rather than as a temporary way to help get themselves out of trouble. And thus societies, by a simple process of natural selection, would end up adopting more low time preference cultural values, which tend to lean conservatives. We've actually seen this in history. If you look at the private welfare systems of the past before the New Deal, we see how they often had behavioral requirements in order to maintain or apply for membership. And those requirements ultimately tended to frown upon degenerate behavior. And it's really not that hard to understand why. I mean, just imagine yourself as the private owner of one such system. Looking at your finances, you notice that people who are hard drug abusers tend to be, well, net negatives, almost always finding themselves in distress and in need of assistance from the mutual aid fund, and they just keep screwing up over and over and over again. Thus, the incentive to require prospective members to, at the very least, submit to rehab and make a concentrated effort to overcome their addiction becomes the obvious answer to your problem, or just physically removing them altogether by banning drug abusers from joining the mutual aid fund. Because social welfare already is hard enough to take care of the people who fall ill to no fault of their own. And so why should you be taking a profit loss for the people who are the cause of their own problem?
I totally agree
so it
with
just
this.
makes sense in an actual free society to not be degenerate. It's just more profitable in the long run. And there's also just an inherent problem of hypocrisy of any left libertarian who takes issue with this and tries to reject Hoppe's work or downplay his importance. Here we have the Classical Liberal Caucus of Texas posting a long time ago, which by the way don't hold them accountable for this because they're now under better leadership. But basically they posted this typical meme of basically saying Hoppe bad, thanking all these philosophers for their contributions to libertarian theory, but not Hoppe. To
Why
which
did
I
they hit him?
responded this: there's a much more direct question for libertarians who reject Hoppe. How exactly would you stop a private city society with right-wing values from forming without violating the NAP? The answer, hilariously, is that you must form a libertarian private society of your own and physically remove the Hoppians, which means you have become us. You have admitted that we are right. Are you going to physically remove yourselves next? Either that, or you create a state that bans any form of private cities from existing, in which case you have ceased to be libertarian. The reality is that society needs some kind of rule of law in order to function and facilitate economic growth. Libertarianism simply replaces that law with a system that is in line with voluntary association instead of by force through a non-productive class. This means there will still be rules. Libertarianism is not when no rules. And I'd like to add to this that this also means that libertarianism is not when no culture. Libertarianism is when society and rule places the NAP first, which means that if people do not want to associate with crappy culture and don't want to associate with those who litter the streets, and a private society doesn't want to have people camping on the sidewalks while shooting up heroin, well then removing them is entirely within their rights within a libertarian society, and is in fact easier to do and more effective to do than how Western society and rules currently work today.
Yeah, because it's so ridiculous, right? Like, not only you can't get rid of them, you gotta pay for their shit. You gotta pay for all of their failings, like all the time. That's what they do, and it drags everyone else down.
Anybody who denies this and says that, oh, well, that's authoritarian to kick these people out of your society, well, then you also have to claim that the NAP itself is authoritarian, in which case the left libertarian has simply become a communist with extra steps. And so this just all brings us to the question, what should the libertarian strategy be in regards to culture then? And I believe the optimal strategy is actually just a two-pronged approach. The first is that we need to start actually fighting the Marxists where they are, as opposed to just constantly infighting. If you believe in liberty and believe in the free market, and you are in a position to influence one of these institutions, then you should do so. A lot of people who get into libertarian theory, especially the people who reject Hoppe, which again is often the libertarians who think that culture wars don't matter, it comes from the misunderstanding of, again, thinking that tolerance and acceptance is a libertarian value. And no, they're not. You do not have to leave culture alone. You do not have to just accept the garbage propaganda that neo-Marxists are constantly churning out using their connections and positions within the media. If you are in a position where you can gain control of these and do something about it, then you should. It is entirely within libertarian values to do something like publishing a non-fiction book and having a story that reflects those values. It is, again, a very weird blindside that currently exists within libertarian strategy to just ignore the culture war, when it is in fact a fantastic way to talk to ordinary, normal, everyday people in a way that doesn't sound completely preachy. Because when you just come to someone, and if you were to walk up to someone on the street and just say, hey, do you want to talk about Rothbard's theories on the anatomy of the state? I mean, let's just be real for a moment. You're going to come across as a total autist. That is not how the average person comes to believe things. And it often makes very little sense to me, because it's often...
People, you know, they believe things through, like, the media that they experience. I mean, that's how a lot of people became so lefty and so, you know, pro crazy shit, right? Is that it was literally psyoped and hammered into people's heads from a young age.
And also the people who are the anti-pragmatic, naptists, nap worshippers, those type of libertarians who look down on these cultural issues. And yet cultural issues are a libertarian strategy towards getting more libertarians that does not violate the nap. It is actually one of the most effective non-pragmatic strategies we have. And yet what I'll often see, for example, in my own channel...
It's kind of like why I like the idea of psyoping people will, like, take it and see it as a bad thing, but I don't think that it's a bad thing. I think you have, and you know, this goes into, like, my whole thing where I was talking about battlefields and like mages, right? Like wizards and sorcerers is that you need to have spellcasters on your side. It's absolutely necessary. And a lot of people are too proud to like employ spellcasting because they think it's below them. And that's how you lose. And that's how the conservatives got so fucking shitted on, by the way. It's like the whole reason that we're even in this state in the first place is that the conservatives, mostly conservatives, thought that they were above actually engaging in psyop and propaganda. So they got out psyoped, out propagandized, and like they lost a lot of their young. They lost an entire generation, really, right? Like you think about was it like millennials? Just lost them basically, like just turbo fucking woke, right?
Let's all make a video calling out some journalists for some Marxist subversion, and yet one of these naptists will come in and go, oh, this is culture war slop. Because apparently, when I was not aware of it, not calling out neo-Marxist subversions of our media institutions and just doing nothing while the neo-Marxists continue to retain complete control and brainwash the next generation with their nonsense.
And the problem is I think this kind of ties in to the idea that there are some people who create like these sort of rules of properness, rules of... Honestly, I think it's just because I'm American. I'm like very, very, very much like old culture American, kind of like what Malcolm talks about, where I care more about like the results than I care about like the code of conduct, basically. Like if the code of conduct makes me lose, I don't really give a shit about it. Like I'm totally willing to snipe officers, right, with rifles in the woods. Right, like I'm not gonna like line up and like do the shooting thing when you outpower me, basically, right?
Apparently, it just became an unspoken rule in libertarian circles that we're just going to let the neo-Marxists do that and not push back against it at all. And yes, I know I'm kind of breaking one of my own rules here and engaging in some libertarian infighting with this video here, but it really needs to be called out and emphasized just how toxic this mentality is to the liberty movement as a whole. It's like they're addicted to losing or something. Or in other words, de-Marxist subversion of our cultural institutions is good, actually. It is completely within libertarian ethics and philosophy to do so. It does not violate the NAP in any way. It is basically free real estate and free libertarian strategy that the current Libertarian Party officials just kind of look at and look down on and just completely ignore. And that's ridiculous. It is untapped potential, and again, it just completely ignores how psychology works. The idea that everyone will just suddenly come to their senses and decide to be a philosopher...
That, Rognar, thank you so much for the bits. That wraps back to what Cuck Pence said about being proper over winning. Cuck-servatives are basically proud slaves and losers. I totally agree.
And decide to aggressively study economics.
It's kind of like what Malcolm was talking about too, right? Like how they're like attacking like Vance when like they're attacking Vance for like stupid fucking reasons, for like their dumb purity reasons, like, oh, like his wife is Indian, like what the fuck, like nobody cares, right? Like who gives a shit about that? And he's doing a lot, and you're taking shots at him for no fucking reason. Right? It's ridiculous.
And that everyone would do so if they just had the right environment. Well, that mentality falls into the same fallacious thinking of the liberals who fell for the tabula rasa scam, believing that everybody is just a blank slate, and if we all had the perfect environment, we would all be Einstein. And the evidence is kind of in. This is just not the case. It is not true. People are different, and many psychological traits
Dude, Mentis is fucking psyoping me, guys. I'm getting psyoped right now.
Are genetic. Libertarians need to accept this and move past this. The other prong of this strategy is just attacking the current culture issues from a libertarian perspective. And one very good angle of this is showing how a lot of the cultural decay...
And you know what? Actually, what Mentis is talking about right now solves my problem with libertarians. Because remember how I said I used to be a libertarian? It was this reason that I was like, you guys are fucking retarded. It was this exact thing that... Remember I talked about how like they... fuck, what did I say again before? I said my brain just blue screened. Basically, my problem with... Yeah, the problem is that the culture matters, and like the culture matters, and like you just cannot have like a state in which it's like absolute like free-for-all where just everybody does whatever. So like what Mentis is saying, like his setup with like how there's communities and like you God, my brain is blown up right now. Like you're like everybody agrees to specific things and everybody willingly is a part of that, but then like that doesn't mean that you can't have like a culture there, and then you can't have like a basically pointed goal within like that group. I guess what I'm saying. And since we do live in a society, we have to deal with other people, which involves not giving them money for you know, doing nothing. Sorry,
is
I
actually
totally,
due to,
I totally
again,
lost
the
the thread
welfare
in my
state.
mind. But
Here's a really good article from Mises Wire, The Cultural Consequences of the Welfare State. The
gotta pick a side, libertarian Svensson. I mean, I don't know about that. I think most do, probably. There's a lot that probably do. So, yes, I guess I kind of do agree with you on that. But what Mentis is talking about is like a complete... And you know, maybe that's why they hate him. Not Mentis, but they hate the Hop guy. Maybe it's because of this.
basic idea of it is just using the state to entitle people to the things that the mutual aid societies of the past used to do instead. Early systems in the 1800s being compulsory insurance for accident, health, disability, and age, pensions, and then called this state socialism. And again, these are things that people could already buy and join from private markets. And here's the thing, this state socialism was not done to make these programs more efficient, but rather it was done to generate dependence and loyalty. It certainly wasn't because it's more profitable to do things this way. In fact, quite the
one reason for this is that if you have choice, having choice puts power into the hands of the average person. The government dictating what happens gives the government all of the power. And when there's choice, better options become created because they have to compete, whereas the government doesn't have to compete at all. The government says, like, we do this thing. And this is why, by the way, the government is so insanely inefficient, is because they don't allow any sort of, they force you to participate in their version of things. And if you want, like, anything if you want anything other than that, you have to pay for both. Right, so it's
opposite.
Yeah,
this
it's annoying.
ends up costing society way more in the long run. But the bigger problem is that
my
it gets
libertarian
rid
friend's
of the physical
complaint
removal
about Mentis is because he supports closed borders, which is partially what this video tackles. Okay, let's hear it.
Which would ordinarily allow the free market to weed out degeneracy. And here's the thing, this has been going on for so long that people have essentially forgotten about it. One of the key issues with libertarianism I see coming from kind of general bog standard conservatives is that they think that what we're seeing in our cultural degeneracy and decline of the West is due to woke capitalism, when in fact the exact opposite is true. It's because we got rid of the financial constraints on degeneracy and replaced them with entitlement, as the welfare state completely lacks the behavioral requirements that naturally show up in mutual aid societies of the past. And so thus, crime rates, dependency, structural unemployment, parasitism, psychopathy, and hedonism have increased. And the article explains the reason. It's that for the public, government moderation has only disadvantages. When you receive a subsidy without any kind of quid pro quo, there is no incentive to be more productive in the future. As a result, productive activity and long-term forecast decline.
And this is why socialism is so retarded, by the way. It's so obviously retarded, which is why it really upsets me. Like, if there's one thing that upsets me, it's fucking communists. Like, commies are the fucking worst. Like, they don't understand anything about incentive, which is the #1 driving force, obviously, for humans. It's so stupid.
Redistribution taxes to most productive individuals by removing their
commies are literally the worst. They're fucking
infantilization and moral degeneration of civil society. And to add to this, the thing that a lot of people look at today is the question of public trust and the failure of multiculturalism, with the standard complaint being that Western society keeps getting flooded with immigrants, a lot of whom are strangely non-productive. And the reason why is because the welfare state kind of incentivizes them to come here without actually...
They wouldn't come here if you didn't really give them free shit, honestly. They just get fucked, basically.
Needing to be productive. And so now Western civilization is finding itself in a position...
If you didn't give free shit to people that were illegal, then why the fuck would they be here?
Where the people who built the society and are funding that society, well, we find ourselves being forced to fund the welfare of our effective replacement. And because the welfare state is, again, an entitlement, it doesn't actually have any kind of behavioral or cultural or any kind of value requirement to it. And by value in this context, I mean social values, the need to be a civilized human being. Because these entitlement systems lack that, well, the situation we find ourselves in was inevitable. Or as the article points out, the welfare state has led to the elimination of the responsibility to act decently, encouraging incivility, vandalism, and lawbreaking. And honestly, when you take a step back and look at it from an outside-in perspective, it's kind of obvious. When you eliminate the need to be a decent person in order to have access to the social safety net of a society, then, well, surprise, surprise, people are going to come in and have no incentive to be decent people.
Yep,
and what libertarians need to do is we need to point out that these issues with cultural degeneracy, they're just going to keep happening so long as we have this entitlement system. Because a lot of conservatives, they'll just go down the rabbit hole of becoming a white nationalist or something in response to this. But then they'll want to keep the welfare state. They don't want to do anything about getting rid of the welfare.
That's a good point,
and they don't realize that if you have a welfare state with, say, white people only, so ethno-nationalist socialism, I mean, sure, that might be a little better than multicultural socialism, but it's still socialism, and it's still...
You're still going to have the exact same problems. This is a really good point, yeah.
Entitlement, and so people will still lack the incentive to actually be decent human beings. And so you're really not fixing much unless you get rid of the entitlement. With the irony being that the welfare state actually hurts the poor because the welfare state makes society suck. And so when libertarians take a step away from this and just completely ignore the culture war, we're kind of giving Marxists a platform to sell their own solution. Their solution to cultural degeneracy, their answer to why the streets have so much trash, why there's a lack of social trust, why is housing so expensive, why do we have all these homeless people. Well, the neo-Marxists, they like to get their little claws on the media and sell the idea that this is all because of capitalism, which is a complete lie. It was all caused by state socialism. And yet the neo-Marxists...
explain all the other communist places then. How about that?
Marxists are constantly creating stories within video games and within movies.
Isn't it crazy how whenever there's a country that's like communist socialist, and then they start to become a little bit more capitalist, that they start to get a little bit better? Isn't that fucking weird? Damn, that's so weird. How does that keep happening? Like, how does it keep happening all the time?
And TV shows and books, etc., and have fully ingrained themselves into intellectual institutions. And then they use the cultural decay that's largely caused by them as evidence of late-stage capitalism, selling the idea that it's the lack of equity and lack of free stuff and lack of entitlement that's causing all of these issues. And when libertarians, when we walk away from this, when we say that, oh, the culture wars are beneath us, well, we're just handing the neo-Marxists a free victory. We're not talking to the average person, to the average guy on the street, in a way that he will actually care to listen. We're just gonna let them say that the solution to all of our problems is more government intervention, more free stuff, more entitlements, more tolerance and acceptance of multiculturalism, more moral relativism, and other such nonsense. And in response to this, I'll just point out to a simple fact, and I don't mean to brag here, but there's a reason why my channel broke the normal 100k subscriber libertarian curse. And it's really not a big secret. I just make content about some of the issues that everyday normal people are talking about and explain why the neo-Marxist solutions that are being offered are entirely fraudulent solutions.
I love this channel, Mentis Wave channel. Great.
Because if you want to really spread the message of liberty and explain why the free market is a...
Guys, I highly recommend this channel. Check it out. I like Mentis. Mentis is great.
A good thing, you gotta talk about issues that the average person actually cares about. It really is that simple. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you like my content, you can support me on Ko-Fi, Subscribestar, or by buying some merch.
Highly recommend the taxation is theft mug and the Fumo hats. Highly recommend both of them from the Mentis shop.
Or again, by checking out this video sponsor.
Although I need to get a new mug because my dad took it. My dad took my taxation is theft Mentis mug. He took it.
Have an internet access.
Yeah,
thanks again for watching. That is all.
He saw it and he was like, yoink.
Till next time.
Yeah, I got taxed. You're right. Fuck. Dad tax. Yeah. It's because what happened. Okay, here's what happened. Okay, so my dad wears baseball caps, so I got him the taxation is theft baseball cap, right? And I was gonna give him the hat, and then he saw the mug, and he was like, "But I want that." And I was like, "You want the cup, Dad?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Okay." I just gave him the cup. Yeah. Yeah, Dad tax, like, dude, for real. I really need to go back. You know, I've been meaning to do this, is to like go back and watch Mentis's other videos, like his older videos, you know, like the ones from like 3 years ago and stuff like that. Like I really want to go over these as well. I mean, look at the numbers on here, dude. Holy fuck, 300K, 200K, 200K, 300K, dude. There's a lot of people watching these. He's doing a lot. He's doing a lot for the culture. I really like it. Cool guy, Mentis Wave. All right, anyway.
I called Epstein a bitch in Fortnite just last week. He's alive in the bunker, listen to him speak. He ruined WoW, he nerfed the loot. He's trading fan art in an Armani suit.